I've got a business trip this weekend, so I'm counting on you to take care of the house and mom, okay? What? Again? I can handle the weekdays, but not having you around on the weekends is tough. Do you realize how hard it is? Well, I have work, so what can I do? That's true, but... Then why don't you start working? If you do, I'll handle everything at home. Think you can earn as much as I do? That's impossible. Right? So, please, no complaints. I'm counting on you. That was a conversation with my husband before our problems began. Looking back, it's strange to think that he was always away on business trips, even on weekends. This is the story of my husband's selfish actions. We live with mother-in-law. It's been few years since we started living together. Mother-in-law has dementia. Her symptoms are still mild, but she needs special care. At first, it was just a bit of forgetfulness, but then her understanding and judgment deteriorated. She became irritable, and when we went to the doctor, she was diagnosed with dementia. Amidst this, father-in-law, who had been chronically ill, passed away. After that, mother-in-law lost even more spirit and started to shut herself in her room. After discussing what to do about mother-in-law with the family, we decided that my husband, as the eldest son, would take care of her. When I decided to marry him, I knew that this day would come. Before mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia, she was very cheerful and lively. She had my husband when she was young, so she is quite younger than my parents. She was strict with my husband when he was a child, and he still is a bit scared of her, but she and I got along very well. She was always kind to me and was always on my side. I admired and loved her very much. Whenever my husband and I had an argument, I would report it to her, and she would scold my husband for me. It was quite funny to see my husband's troubled face. I believe we got along better than most mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. However, as I mentioned earlier, since the death of father-in-law, she lost her spirit and stopped being strict with my husband. Or rather, she stopped talking much. Taking advantage of that, my husband's attitude gradually changed. It was as if he was taking revenge for the past, becoming more arrogant. In hindsight, the family discussion may have been my husband's strategy. Initially, sister-in-law and her husband, who lived near my in-laws, were supposed to take in mother-in-law, but my husband prevented it. I'm the eldest son, so I'll take care of her. My husband was very insistent. He was always getting scolded by his mother. They weren't particularly close, which made me wonder why. Maybe he did have a sense of duty as the eldest son. But for some reason, I didn't feel that was all there is to it. Perhaps it was intuition. And when we started living with her, the bad feeling I had became a reality. Taking advantage of Emil's quietness, he did and said whatever he wanted. He started to boldly speak his mind to her, even though he was so afraid of her before. Because of her dementia, it takes time for her to understand what's being said to her. Yet, my husband didn't hold back his complaints. And I was the one who would stop him. Then, an event occurred, hinting my husband's misdeeds. After a 3-day business trip, my husband returned home. As usual, I went to unpack his bag and found a pair of unfamiliar underwear. I always bought his underwear, so it was strange to see something I didn't recognize. It was men's underwear, so it definitely belonged to him, but it raised questions, so I decided to ask him about it. Hey, what happened to the underwear you took with you? Huh? What underwear? I've never seen this pair before. Did you buy it yourself? Yeah, I did. I had to buy some in a hurry over there. Why did you have to buy it? What happened to the ones you had? They got torn, so I threw them away. They were old, right? Torn? But I bought those recently. Oh, really? Maybe they just weren't good quality? Is that so? Watching his suspicious behavior, I felt uneasy, but I didn't press further. For a moment, a thought crossed my mind, but I decided not to worry about it. I was hoping nothing more would come of it. However, a few days later, another incident occurred. My husband returned from another business trip. I went to the door to welcome him. Welcome home. How was the trip? Yeah, it was fine. My husband was looking down, lacking his usual energy. What's wrong? Are you sick? I asked him. No, that's not it. I have something important to discuss. He replied, with a serious face. Mother-in-law had already gone to bed. I sat in the living room, ready to listen to what my husband had to say. And I was shocked by his words. I want a divorce. I was lost for words since it was so sudden. I'm sorry to shock you. But please, let's get a divorce. Why? What's the matter? To be honest, I've fallen in love with someone else. I've been having an affair. I'm sorry. That explained the unfamiliar underwear. It all made sense now. So you've been deceiving me all this time. You're the worst. I deserve that. There's more. It's hard to say, but she's pregnant. Pregnant? What? My voice involuntarily raised in shock. I didn't expect this to happen. I just found out about the pregnancy yesterday. She's 6 months pregnant. I still can't believe it. But we have no choice but to have the baby. I intend to be the father. That's why I'm asking for a divorce, please. Fine. I'll get divorced. After hearing that, there's no way we can continue as husband and wife. Thank you. I'm sorry. And you need to talk to mother-in-law yourself. With that, he fell silent. Why have you suddenly gone quiet? He awkwardly said. It's about my mother. Would you be able to take care of her? What? Do you realize what you're saying? I know it's selfish to ask. But my side chick can't handle taking care of my mother and her upcoming child. You understand that, right? How can you even ask for a divorce in this situation? Is it too much to ask? Of course. If you want a divorce, be prepared to take care of everything on your own. I understand. I'll figure something out. With that, he went to his room and closed the door. I didn't want to think about anything that day, so I just showered and went to bed. The next morning, something felt off. The room seemed too clean. Things were gone from the house. I had a bad feeling and rushed to my husband's room. He was already gone, and so were his belongings. I just sat there, feeling defeated. On the bed was a filled-out divorce form. And beside it, a note with just the words, "I'm sorry." And just like that, he left his mother, who needed care, behind. As I thought about what to do next, my hatred grew. I would never forgive him. I decided to seek revenge and started making plans. I immediately took action. I went to a detective agency to gather evidence of his infidelity. Since we haven't filed for a divorce yet, we were still legally married. He probably hadn't thought of that. I quickly found out where he was staying. The house of his mistress. The evidence of the affair quickly piled up. I had gathered enough proof in half the time I had requested from the private investigator. I decided to tell mother-in-law first. Although I wasn't sure she would understand, I explained it to her slowly and clearly. To my surprise, I saw a change in her facial expression. She responded with such clarity that I was convinced she was becoming her former self again. It turned out that the mistress worked at the same company as my husband, and mother-in-law suggested sending the evidence to his workplace. This will be our first act of revenge, she said with a smile. A few days later, my husband called, frantic. Yes, what is it? I responded calmly. Sending evidence of my affair to my workplace. Are you out of your mind? My husband was making a fuss over the phone. I never thought you'd do something like this. You're mistaken. It wasn't me who sent it. Then who did? It had to be you. Are you blaming it on me alone? Your abandoned mother is the one who did it. Don't think this is the end of it. I said what I had to say and hung up the phone. The phone kept ringing persistently after that, but I ignored it. Then mother-in-law came in. Time for our next move, she said and returned to her room, seemingly making a phone call. A few hours later, the doorbell rang. There was a woman standing in front of the door. I immediately recognized her, my husband's mistress. The face I had seen in photos. It seems that mother-in-law had called her over. I stayed in my room, leaving it to mother-in-law to handle the situation. Since my room was far from the living room, I couldn't hear anything, so I waited for the mistress to leave before asking mother-in-law about it. It seems the mistress was unaware of Emil's condition. If you're planning to marry my son, you'll have to take care of me. Are you okay with that? I think I'll be unable to use the bathroom on my own soon. Will you still marry him? Upon hearing this, the mistress was confused. Well, what's going to happen next? Mother-in-law seemed genuinely excited, almost making me wonder if her dementia had been cured by the thrill. And who would have predicted the outcome of her actions? The next day, the doorbell rang, and it was my husband at the door. What is it now? I was wrong. I want to talk. I decided to let him into the house to talk. Then, I heard an unexpected story from my husband. I broke up with her. The child isn't mine. It turned out that the mistress had multiple partners. She knew the child wasn't my husband's, but considered raising the child as his because of his status and financial stability. However, after speaking directly with mother-in-law, she realized she couldn't possibly be taking care of her. She got scared and confessed the truth to my husband. Upon reflection. Can we start over again? You don't need to answer right away. My answer is already clear. Leave this house immediately. We haven't filed for a divorce yet, because you missed signing one part in the paper. Since I have all the evidence of the affair, I will be seeking alimony. Please be prepared for that. I handed the divorce papers to my husband with a smile. Please, have mercy. Take responsibility for your actions, I said as I pushed him out of the house. Shortly after my husband left, mother-in-law came home from the hospital. Sister-in-law, who had accompanied her to the hospital, was there too, so I took the opportunity to report to her about what had happened. He got what he deserved. Sister-in-law said angrily. I really appreciate everything you've done, Mary. Taking care of me and dealing with my worthless son. I'm so sorry. I'll be moving in with my daughter now, so you go ahead and enjoy your life. Tears welled up in Emil's eyes as she said this. The next day, she moved in with sister-in-law. When I asked sister-in-law about Emil's condition, she said that while her dementia is somewhat managed with medication, it certainly wasn't cured. Eventually, my divorce finalized, and I received a fair amount of alimony. The mistress quit her job. Since mother-in-law sent the evidence of the affair to the company, it made her very uncomfortable to stay there. My husband submitted a transfer request to the company himself. It seems he got a demotion and a considerable amount of reduction in income. As for me, caring for mother-in-law has inspired me to help others in similar situations. I am currently studying to go into nursing. I'm grateful for mother-in-law because she led me to this dream. I truly hope for the progression of her dementia to slow down so that she can live longer.